Hilary, thanks for joining us at Hub Dialogues.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Hilary, I've really been looking forward to this conversation. As our listeners and viewers know, we've been digging into artificial intelligence in general over the past several weeks and open source AI in particular, and how those in the world of policy and politics ought to be thinking about it. And you've just co-authored a really insightful report called "The Value of Open Source AI for the Canadian Economy: A Review of Industry, Academic, and Open Source Evidence." And I was hoping to drill into it today over the course of our conversation.
That's great, Sean. Thanks very much for the opportunity. We are so excited for this report to be brought forward to Canadian stakeholders. And as a Canadian, I am extremely happy that this study has been done. And I think the data from this report really needs to be heard,
Yeah,
really needs to
indeed.
be shared.
Indeed, policymakers, of course, are grappling with some really big fundamental questions about Canadian policy vis-a-vis AI, and I think the study and its findings ought to be part of that conversation. Before we get into some of those particular findings, I want to step back for a minute because our listeners and viewers will know that on one hand, Canada has had something of first mover advantage when it comes to AI research. Some of the world's most significant research projects are found in Toronto and other parts of the country. And yet, we haven't yet translated that advantage into AI leadership when it comes to the business sector. How are you thinking about that disconnect?
It's most unfortunate, Sean. I mean, as a Canadian, I'm super proud of Canada's leadership and the extent to which we did have first mover advantage with the establishment of world-renowned think tanks like the Vector Institute in Toronto,
Yes.
Mila in Montreal, tremendous support from the Canadian government and from the private sector. Um, in 2016 and 2017 and 2018, we had this
Mm,
phenomenal support for R&D, and that's exactly what we created for ourselves. Where we find ourselves is what is in the valley of death between R&D and commercialization and intellectual property. And that's the conundrum that Canada needs to come to terms with and the opportunity at the same time. We know we have the talent, we know we have the research, but now we have to get to commercialization. Now we have to
mm,
get to execution and building on a lead that we should all be proud of, and building on the talent that we have within our country. There's so much that we can do with the foundation that we have established in R&D. So that's the exciting part is, okay, now is the time to leverage this incredible foundation.
yeah, indeed. And I promise, Hillary, we'll get to the exciting part before we wrap up our conversation. But the gap that we've been discussing is sometimes referred to as an adoption lag. What's your intuition, or what does the research tell you? Why have Canadian firms generally been slower to scale AI than global peers?
In terms of adoption, I think there is a culture disadvantage that Canadian enterprises present. And that stems from perhaps a culture of caution and a culture of complacency,
Mm,
and not really needing to necessarily have to outcompete or outshoot. But that's all changed. So, one thing that we have to come to terms with is redefining cultures of excellence among Canadian corporations. And that includes Canada's bread and butter core industries. That also includes startups, and it also includes policy stakeholders to help create the incentives that allow cultures of innovation to really flourish. So, change management and education are part of how we transform cultures within our organizations. We have to have empirical evidence that shows that technologies can add value. And I think that's the utility of a research report, the kind of which
Yes.
we've collaborated with Meta on, to provide that empirical evidence, to help knowledge translation so that decision makers, leaders of corporations, venture capitalists, and so on, can have the empirical baseline to make decisions. And so it's change management, and then it's also overcoming a fear of the unknown and perhaps a lot of misinformation and a lack of
Yes.
trust in technologies. There's a fear factor when there's a transformation shift. There is a sense of trepidation, and that's normal and natural, but we cannot let that stall our opportunity to embrace the new in terms of AI and open source AI. These are not bells that we can unring. It's like the emergence
Yes.
of the World Wide Web. We have to
Yes.
embrace change and create opportunities that come with it.
Um, One idea that you introduce in the report that I hadn't seen before, but I found interesting, and I suspect our listeners and viewers would as well, is that of quote unquote AI readiness. Talk a bit about what AI readiness means, Hilary, and what it would actually look like inside a Canadian company.
Yeah, there are a lot of factors that define readiness. Let's talk about design decision making and design thinking around AI. And I have the privilege at the Linux Foundation of seeing the world's most innovative companies, the most AI ready corporations in the world, the most
Yeah.
successful companies, and how they are making design and architectural and infrastructure decisions, and they're choosing open source, and they're choosing it for a number of reasons. So having that foundation, that understanding of the opportunities that open source software, open hardware, open standards, open data, when you get that architecture right, you are at the that is the first step towards AI readiness. The second comes down to skills. Are you um, attracting the right talent to your organization? Are you upskilling the resources that you have within your organization to meet your innovation mandates? And the bad news is that most organizations do not have the skills that they need, and they can't afford to hire the skills that they need right now. So they have to train with the teams that they have. They can't hire their
Hmm.
way out of this conundrum. So
Hmm.
skills is a big part of what it means to be ready. I think um, organizational culture is also a big part of that. Having an innovative posture means that you're willing to innovate locally, but collaborate globally. And that's what I'm
Hmm.
seeing among leading organizations who really are AI ready. They have an ecosystem first posture. They leverage the talent and the practices of leading practitioners all over the world. So they're not terribly regional centric. They're very globally minded. They engage in technology ecosystems like open source foundations, like open source projects, and they build on the talent of others. So that is a huge sign of readiness. And then the extent to which an organization is deriving revenue from their digital posture, generating revenue from new, highly useful digital products, as well as increasing their productivity and lowering their internal operational costs through digital transformation, is another sign of maturity and readiness. So that it's multi-pronged, Sean, in terms of what readiness really looks like, and it's a journey.
Indeed. Now, I mentioned open source in my introduction, and you've touched on it a few times in your observations thus far. Let's pause there for a minute and go a bit deeper. Why, in your mind, Hillary, is open source AI key to moving from what you characterize in the report as pilots to production. What is it about the open source model that you think can solve for that valley of death or the gap between world-class research and the slowness when it comes to adoption in Canada's business sectors?
Well, I think the number one opportunity around open source being that accelerator to take to go from pilots to production is speed to
Mm.
market. No need to reinvent the wheel, no need to recode what already exists. These solutions are robust, highly tested, and high quality code, and they're free. And so the pathway to product is that much faster when you leverage an open source foundation, that pre-competitive layer. So in terms of speed to market, speed to development, um, lowering your total cost of technology ownership, and then also being able to leverage, again, through these open source communities, through the ideas and practices that come through open source projects to build out your capacity just that much faster. So the speed is one important element. The cost. It's why open source is used primarily. Open source AI models are used mostly by small and medium-sized businesses on a global
Mm.
scale. It's very,
Mm.
very cost effective. So you can't argue with free. You can't argue with optimization of time and resources. So it makes a lot of business sense to use what's open, what's tested, what's trustworthy, and go and start building with it.
Yeah. We've been talking so far about, amongst other issues, the opportunities and challenges thus far when it comes to the adoption of AI technology across different parts of the economy. One of the things I like the most about the report, Hilary, is that you disaggregate Canada's a diverse economy and drill down into some key sectors where either we're starting to see exciting uh, new adoptions of AI, or where you think there is the most value to be extracted from AI adoption and usage. Why don't you talk a bit about some of those growth areas in Canada right now?
Yeah, I mean, Canada has leading industries, world-class industries. We have tremendous resources, energy and natural resources. We have um, a globally leading financial services sector. There are core industries, manufacturing. There's so much that can be leveraged already from the fact that we do have leading industries. And when we see even further levels of modernization within our core industries, interoperability across our industries,
Mm.
greater collaboration across provinces, that's really exciting from a high level point of view. So leveraging on our strengths and using new technologies to do what we're already doing well and take it to a whole new competitive level is one incredible opportunity. The other opportunity is to leverage Canada's culture of innovation. The fact that we have so many talented technologists living in Canada, we have renowned universities, we've got these corridors of innovation and a history of creating um, um, leading startups and Fortune 500 companies. So I'm hugely optimistic for the startup sector in Canada to do what it's done at an accelerated rate, and maybe there's a new urgency for that. I'm
Mm.
excited to see the transformation of our energy sector through open source. I'm seeing amazing things coming out of Quebec, Hydro-Quebec, using open source technologies, open source AI, and drone technology to improve its inspection of power lines. I think that's a great novel case, and I'd like to see other provinces follow in Hydro-Quebec's lead. They're extraordinary collaborators in open source. They're contributing code. They're modernizing their infrastructure and they're creating new opportunities to lead in empowering the compute that we're going to be able to support for the future. So energies, the growth for Canada's energy sector and the leadership of a utility like Hydro-Quebec is definitely noteworthy and something that I'm really excited about. Financial services, we have leading banks worldwide. Canadian banks are trusted, they're
Mm.
innovative, and they're doubling down on their open source engagement and their use and adoption of AI technology. So I'm excited about where they're going to go in the years ahead.
Now, I want to come back to something you said earlier because it resonated with me, and I suspect it would resonate a lot with our listeners and viewers, and that is that in an economy where something north of 90% of Canadians work for SMEs, that is small or medium sized enterprises, open source AI may be a better fit for them. Why don't you talk a bit more about that? What is it about open source AI that makes itself more accessible to small and medium enterprises in Canada?
I think the cost opportunity for open source AI makes it an absolute no-brainer for small and medium-sized businesses in Canada. It's
Mm.
affordable. There's no need to pay high subscription fees when a highly effective model already exists that's free to use. There was a study done by a colleague of ours, chief economist at Linux Foundation, Frank Nagel. He also works at MIT, and he came out with a report that measured the opportunity cost of not using open source AI models to be at $25 billion. And
Wow.
that's an opportunity cost that it's value that's on the table. It's a lot of value to be captured by making a design decision to open source AI.
Um, Now, you mentioned financial services and a couple other parts of Canada's economy that are subject to significant regulation for prudential reasons or security ones or whatever. Um, Talk about those sectors and the adoption of OpenAI. To what extent does it represent, if at all, potential risks that they need to manage or mitigate?
Yeah, that's a great question. Interestingly, highly regulated industries have been known to be innovation laggards, but in
Mhm.
financial services, that's not been true. We have seen incredible innovation coming out of the financial services sector, in spite of it being a highly regulated industry. We're seeing great levels of collaboration and open source ecosystems. One of the ways in which the banks are collaborating, particularly the Canadian banks collaborating with their global peers, is on mutualizing the cost of regulatory risk and lowering their costs on a pain point that they all experience. It's not a competitive product, but it's a regulatory risk management play. And they find value in coming together in open source communities to talk about how they manage that regulatory risk. And they've created tooling to help support their common regulatory obligations that makes everybody's operations more cost effective. Where I'm seeing them collaborate in AI is to create AI governance frameworks. And one of our project communities at the Linux Foundation is called the FinTech Open Source Foundation. And RBC is, in fact, the chair of the board of of that industry vertical. BMO has been a leading collaborator. TD has just joined, and they're all collaborating on this governance framework to manage AI risk. And what they're doing is they're identifying both um, the risk side, but also the mitigation side of how they ingress AI technologies and how they egress code back into the community. So there are pathways for highly regulated industries to engage in open ecosystems and work together, collaborate around governance, collaborate around trust. These are pre-competitive activities. They don't create um, uh, conflict at this lower level of the software stack. They solve common challenges, and that's where we're seeing a lot of engagement around the financial services sector specifically. Healthcare is another amazing opportunity for regulated industry. Get the key players at the table, create regulatory frameworks, get everybody involved on how to work through common challenges in order to get mutual gains. There is a proven pathway to doing that and to collaborating. And that's what I am hoping to see as an outcome of this report, that more industries in Canada will collaborate through open source ecosystems, will leverage open models, and will work through common challenges so that we can achieve our productivity goals, that we can achieve our GDP growth targets more readily.
Before we wrap up, we'll talk a bit more about what business can do to, as you say, collaborate and leverage these technologies in the service of individual firms and the industry as a whole. But this conversation is occurring against a backdrop when the government itself is carrying out consultations on its AI strategy. Ostensibly, that strategy will need to make some judgments about how it thinks about open source AI without getting too far into the kind of technocratic weeds. How should policymakers be thinking about these questions, and what's the type of policy steps we should see from government to kind of optimize for AI adoption in general and leveraging the upside of open source AI in particular?
I appreciate the fact that the Canadian government is engaging in a consultative process. However, I think there is an imperative to move a little bit faster
Mm.
and to be more deliberate in our innovation strategy. I think um, we're in a defining moment right now for Canada, and a culture of execution, a culture of reducing red tape and bureaucracy is really what's needed. I think we need to take a close look at the incentive structures that are prohibiting innovation in Canada, that are causing brain drain, um, that are making us uncompetitive on an international scale. So creating incentive structures that encourage innovation, that encourage open source first policies, that um, have the government becoming a model user of open source and building through open source and changing its procurement practices, I think is really important. There's a lot that the government can do to make Canada a more competitive place. But we have to look beyond consultation, and we have to look at what's impeding our ability to execute faster, to move faster, because that's what the competitive organizations are doing. They are in the future is present. It's not 6 months from now. They're innovating today. And yes, they're moving fast and breaking things. And I think that's what we need to be doing a little bit more of in Canada, um, and perhaps a little less caution and care and risk management. I don't think we've got the time to think about things for too long. We have
Yeah,
to
well
take
said.
model. Sorry, Sean.
No, no, go ahead. Pardon me. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I think there are models of collaboration that work, and we have to take a good long look at what other regions are doing, how they're approaching innovation, and change our approach to innovation. And we've been complacent for too long and comfortable for too long. And it's time for Canada to get uncomfortable. That's a great way to be, to innovate. Always be a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, yes, indeed. Well said, Hilary. Just as we start to wrap up, I said I would come back to the question of what business leaders ought to be doing while policymakers aim to address those impediments to adoption and other ways in which the government may be standing in the way. What should business leaders be doing to seize on AI technology in general and the upsides of open source AI as we've been discussing in particular?
I would like business leaders to read our report for starters. But embrace change. This again, it's not a bell that you can unring. AI is here to stay. Open source AI is the pathway to innovation, and so get informed. Learn about the opportunities. Educate on what is myth and misperception, and what is fact and reality, and embrace the opportunity that is unfolding through technologies like AI, and learn how to capitalize on them. Make AI a priority for your organization's strategy. So change your thinking, act with a sense of urgency around this opportunity because the world is moving incredibly fast. We've gone from evaluating generative AI as a thing that is creating novel output to really starting to think it's not about Gen AI anymore. It's about agents. It's
Mm.
about tooling. It's about different aspects of artificial intelligence. We're kind of past models and looking at deep applications and different kinds of levels of transformation. And that's a transition thinking that's happened very, very quickly. So acting with a sense of urgency, following where the world is going and following those trends of innovation, doubling down on open source when you're considering your approach to building digital products and services. I think you've got to skill up your teams. You've got to work with the teams that you have. You've got to provide them with the appropriate learning opportunities and skills opportunities. And you've got to build your ecosystem capacity. You've got to be showing up in the rooms where all the best innovators are also showing up. I'm seeing that opportunity most clearly in open source project communities. The best of the best are working together, no matter which country they're from. They are leveraging the talent of the brightest practitioners all around the world, and they're working collaboratively together while innovating for a local context. That's a very important approach. And it doesn't come naturally to business leaders. It's something it's a muscle that has to be developed. I think that's a very important muscle for business leaders to start developing is building their competitive posture through a global open source ecosystems lens. So that'll be a fascinating evolution to see. I'm looking forward to seeing more Canadian leaders engage in open source project communities. I'm not seeing enough of it, and I'm hoping that this report is a catalyst to changing that and to really charting a new course for Canada's enterprise and for Canadian startups and those who advise them.
Well, that kind of aspirational message is really core to the report, and our listeners and viewers have no doubt heard it over the course of this conversation. It's precisely where I want to end. If policymakers and business leaders heed your advice for urgency and opportunity, what does that look like for Canada? Paint a picture, Hilary, of say 5 years or maybe 10 years from now. What does success look like in your mind?
So success looks like closing the productivity gap that we have with the United States. We have a 30% productivity gap. Let's close that. Let's exceed the forecasted GDP growth rate for AI in Canada. It's forecasted to be 9% by 2035. Let's move that even higher. Let's get a higher GDP outcome as a result of rapid innovation and rapid commercialization and building on this incredible foundation. Let's reshore some of the Canadian companies who have moved away. Let's welcome new organizations to Canada who want to relocate here because we've created the economic incentives to bring them to Canada to set up their innovation mandates and companies. And success looks like a place where startups monetize and stay because they have an incentive to stay in Canada. So a lot of that success factor is about location, and it's about doubling down as where Canada becomes the global innovation hub for emerging technologies like AI. There's a whole other cast of technologies that we excel at too, quantum, and we were leaders in blockchain. We have an incredible opportunity in terms of space. Great histories to build on, and I'd like to see economic growth and productivity gaps closed as urgent goals to meet.
Here, here, here. That's certainly a set of objectives that would resonate with our audience. The report is The Value of Open Source AI for the Canadian Economy, a review of industry, academic, and open source evidence. I've been speaking with Hilary Carter from the Linux Foundation. Hilary, thank you so much for joining us at Hub Dialogues.
Thanks for the opportunity, Sean.